So all through the week, you've seen ANC leaders telling their party's National General Council that the party faces a real threat to its political power and that if it doesn't change, it will lose more votes in next year's elections. At the same time, there's still many reports looking at the relative strength of different candidates to take over from President Cyril Ramaphosa. The National Assembly Speaker Thoko Didiza refused to rule out running for the top job. The Deputy President Paul Mashatile does still seem to be in a strong position. Natasha Marrian is an editor-at-large at Business Day. Natasha, good afternoon to you. I'm sure you saw our teams at the NGC through the week. Did you get a sense that something has shifted in the ANC after what happened in last year's elections?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me. I did. I've been covering these conferences for so many years, and we've heard the same thing successively about renewal, about reform for such a long time. But there was a sense of urgency at this particular NGC. I think it was the first time that branches of the ANC were able to come together and really reckon with that 17 percentage point decline. And it showed in the seriousness with which many of them took the gathering. Before you'd have, most of the delegates at restaurants around the venue sitting and relaxing. But there was a high level of participation. So there was definitely a sense of urgency around this NGC.
We all know how important the person who is the leader is. So the ANC of Thabo Mbeki, different to the ANC of Jacob Zuma, different to the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa. Do you think the situation where the ANC is now, having lost so many votes last year, is this affecting the succession battle? Is the ANC beginning to think more about what voters want?
Well, we've seen in the run-up to the NGC, there was a heightened attention on succession. Thoko Didiza's campaign emerged into the public, out into the open. We saw Fikile Mbalula at the NGC making a very strong impression with delegates singing in his support. And we know that Paul Mashatile's campaign is running, it's moving. But, there was an undertone at this NGC where there was a discussion about, if the reform agenda goes out the window every time we elect a new leader, it's pointless. The ANC is never going to be able to regain its electoral support. And the sense I got, I spoke to a number of NEC leaders, and one of them said to me, the mood is unbelievable. It's something we haven't seen in ages. But if we do not get a leadership team aligned to our needs as a party now, it's finished effectively. So there's a realization that you cannot get a lead. It's not business as usual in ANC succession. And that you have to take the electorate into consideration and the ANC's electoral fortunes. And that makes it very complicated for all the participants, for Mr. Mashatile, for Mr. Mbalula, as well as for Ms. Didiza.
So, this is where it gets complicated, because you have to ask yourself, who do South Africans want? Which ANC leader would they like? I know there is some polling on this, not a huge amount. But that's quite a difficult question to answer. I'm sure that people who support Mashatile in the ANC would say, well, obviously they support him. People who support Mbalula or Didiza would say, no, most voters want them.
In the past, what happened was, irrespective of who the ANC leader was, because of brand ANC around them, that leader was automatically supported. So we saw with the shift from Thabo Mbeki to Jacob Zuma, even though there was a lot of consternation about Jacob Zuma, he had brand ANC behind him. And I think the recognition now is that brand ANC is no longer enough to buttress even a potentially weak leader. So there's definitely that recognition, but I don't know how the ANC will deal with it. The sense I got is that they will see if their support in 2026 stabilizes. And Stephen, you and I both know that that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. And then take it take the leadership question on once they assess the results of the 2026 election.
I mean, it would seem to me that the local elections could really upset the apple cart one way or another, because so much of this is to do with regional and provincial leaders in the ANC. If, for example, Gauteng backs their former leader, Mashatile, and yet the Gauteng ANC does particularly badly in Tshwane, Ekurhuleni and Joburg next year, I mean, would that have an impact?
Absolutely. This was the question at the press conference that we put to the ANC's head of political education, David Makura. You are speaking to us about leadership reform, about reform in the organization, as well as reform of the way you select leaders. But at the same time, just this week, we had the election of Loyiso Masuku in the Johannesburg region, who was implicated in the PPE scandal. His defense on that was that she did appear before the Integrity Committee, and she was cleared, and therefore it was available to her to stand for that position. Whether the electorate sees it that way or not, when should Ms. Masuku be up against Helen Zille, for instance, in the city of Johannesburg, remains to be seen, and that is the importance of the 2026 election. Particularly, if Mr. Mashatile's province does badly, I don't think you will stand a very good and positive chance of going into an internal ANC election very strongly, because as you know, his base is in Gauteng. While he does have support in the Eastern Cape, for instance, if his running mate is Oscar Mabuyane, and he does have some support in a very fractured Limpopo province, he will need his base to be quite solid behind him. And the likelihood of that happening if they perform badly in the elections is not very strong.
On the other side, if you look at Thoko Didiza, I don't know how to put this politely, but I don't know if she even has a base, if she has a constituency, a strong constituency in the ANC.
No, exactly, Stephen. This is the difficulty. Even when Naledi Pandor, I think, ran on President Ramaphosa's ticket in 2017, she had no base. She had no support base. While the reformists who are pushing Ms. Didiza are arguing that she's a more palatable alternative to the electorate. But she still has to, you have to still strike that balance by appealing to the ANC internally. So I suspect that what we're going to see going forward is a lot of lobbying of other leaders who can bring support. For example, the Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula. My understanding is that he will be lobbied quite significantly to step back from the race and perhaps join Ms. Didiza's slate. The other option is Mr. Josienso Ramakgopa, who's the Energy Minister, to stand as her deputy. There's also talk in that grouping to bring Oscar Mabuyane on board. But whether, what Ms. Didiza can offer these candidates, which Mr. Mashatile cannot, I can't see what it is that she can offer, which he cannot.
I mean, there are other things. I mean, Fikile Mbalula, in a way, it's quite astonishing. If you look at his history, he has a nickname, Razzmatazz, and he has it for a reason, famously sort of seemed to enjoy a partying lifestyle. Very controversial at times in office. I remember things happening in the transport department, for example. To his eternal credit, it does seem that he was the first person to tell the NEC of the ANC, I think back in 2012, that the Guptas had too much power. And yet suddenly he seems to, for the moment, be quite a sober Secretary General.
Stephen, I'm as shocked as you are, because I was there at the 2014 election campaign when the ANC first launched bikers at their election rallies. I'm not sure if you remember that. It was 2009 when they launched bikers and these really glitzy Razzmatazz T-shirts. And at that time, Fikile Mbalula was the head of ANC elections. And he, brought a new energy to ANC election campaigns with all these new gimmicks that many parties have copied subsequently. So Mbalula is interesting. He's a very different figure from the one he was back in Polokwane as leader of the Youth League. And he took office as Secretary General after Ace Magashule exited. And as we know, Ace Magashule left that office effectively barren. Even while he was there, very little got done in the secretariat of the ANC. And what Fikile Mbalula seems to have a knack for is surrounding himself with the right people. He's got Phoebe Potgieter as he's the office manager. He's got David Makura as the head of political education, Andres Nal as the head of legal. So he's really assembled a strong team, and you could actually tell the difference in the actual midterm report of that he presented to the NGC. Whether he's presidential or not yet, Stephen, I'm not convinced. He's 54 years old. I think if he can turn around the ANC organizationally, that will give him a good, solid, track record under his belt. But he would need to do that before, you'd need to do something to prove his worth before being elected, before being considered as a presidential candidate.
One of the people who I'm sure will have a strong voice in this, will have a lot of influence in this, is in fact President Cyril Ramaphosa. And as long as he has been the leader of the ANC, so going back to Nasrec in 2017, you'll remember, from that moment, almost from the moment he was elected, people have asked, who does he want to take over? And even today, I'm not sure I could answer that question. It would seem to me, and I've never asked him, but I don't see him publicly supporting Paul Mashatile. Is that important?
I think it would be important, particularly for Mr. Mashatile's credibility. Mr. Mashatile has been painted as this figure who likes a lavish lifestyle. And if you listen to President Ramaphosa's opening report, political report to the NGC, he focused a lot on lifestyle audits, on ANC leaders being accessible to the people, not displaying this lavish display of wealth and ostentatiousness. And those could be read in a way against the controversies Mr. Mashatile faces over his Constantia mansions, etc. But the president has not openly antagonized his deputy. He's not supported him. He's not come out openly to show him any kind of indication that he'd like to be succeeded by him. But he hasn't antagonized him, which is a massive shift from the previous two deputy presidents, which is Ramaphosa himself and obviously Jacob Zuma to Thabo Mbeki. So I think Mr. Ramaphosa, as he does, is playing it quite carefully. I doubt he will want to be seen to be endorsing any particular candidate, as he didn't endorse any candidate for his deputy back in 2022. If you recall, Stephen, there were so many leaders standing for the position of deputy, including Ronald Lamola, Oscar Mabuyane, and Mr. Mashatile himself. And the president was very hands-off on that decision, and I think that will be his stance going forward as well.
Natasha, thank you so much. Natasha Marrian is an editor-at-large at Business Day. Lots to look at.